Hi, this is Jay from Out of Space Games, bringing you our first Extra Space feature. It may not be your typical board game playthrough, but we're trying something different today. In an earlier podcast, episode 2, we kind of talked about the Call of Cthulhu RPG and kind of some techniques in running a scenario and everything. But something we did mention was how difficult it may be sometimes if you've never played the game, trying to run, a scenario for other players. While that might not be the best idea, if you don't have a group to play with, it may be difficult to, have that experience first before you try to run one. And there's only so much you may be able to glean from, the rule books and the handbooks and everything. So the publisher of Call of Cthulhu, Chaosium, they published a solo adventure, kind of to teach you the rules for the brand new 7th edition. And the solo adventure, it's free to download at their website, chaosium.com, but it's designed to let you kind of learn the rule system, see how the gameplay works, so that you understand it and you'll be more prepared as a player, but also perhaps as a keeper, you'll understand some of the mechanics and the decisions that the players can make. So the scenario is called Alone Against the Flames. Again, it's available as a free PDF download on chaosium.com. Written by Gavin Inglis. And it just came out, I believe, a couple months ago, so pretty new. As I understand it, they used to publish these solo scenarios back in the day, but I haven't read through it at all. Supposedly all you need to be able to play this game is the 7th edition Quick Start, which I printed out here, and a blank investigator sheet. All of these are available on the website for free, so I think it's a good idea that they're trying to give people an opportunity to learn the system without having to invest, fully in everything. Of course, you also need dice and a writing utensil. I'm using the scenario on the iPad here in front of me. What's nice about it, and it might be that way in the PDF or something, where you can just click on the numbers, because it has you jump around, similar to a choose your own adventure book. So you can click on the number and it'll take you to the spot instead of having to flip through manually or something. So I'm kind of just going to read along and we'll find out where it goes. Like I said, I have no idea what this scenario is about or where it's going to take me. I haven't read anything except for this brief introduction, which I'll read for you now. Alone Against the Flames. This is a solo adventure for the Call of Cthulhu game. It is a horror story set in the 1920s. Where you are the main character, and your choices determine the outcome. It is also designed to lead you through the basic rules of the game in a gradual and entertaining fashion. Although most such adventures are played with your friends, this one is just for you. Before you begin to play, make sure you have a copy of the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition Quick Start rules, a blank investigator sheet. You do need some role-playing dice. I should mention very quickly, Call of Cthulhu uses percentile dice. So you have one with your tens and one with your single digits. So this is primarily what they use. You'll use other dice depending on the situation, but your skill rolls are primarily with these dice. Continuing on with the introduction. You don't need to read the rules before you start playing. Just settle in a comfortable chair before a roaring fire. Then read on and follow the instructions. On second thoughts, don't sit too close to the fire. The sun is high in the sky, a merciless ball of heat. You feel scorched by the time you reach the bus halt in front of Osborne's drugstore. It's a relief to put down your heavy cases and take off your hat for a moment. You fan your face. It has been a long summer here, in your hometown, and yet a curiously empty one. You look across the street at the grubby butcher's shop, the grocer's, with its faded awning, and the shabby tobacconist. Mistrustful faces glare at you as they pass, eyeing your clothes and luggage. It was your parents' choice to live here, not yours. You were happy down south as a child, among Providence's white-walled houses and leafy churchyards. Perhaps this new job in Arkham will supply the change you need. Yet everybody you know in the world lives here. You know nobody in Arkham, not one soul. You ask yourself one last time if you are doing the right thing. The answer is here. None of your supposed friends have come to see you off. You are all alone. Whatever challenges lie in Arkham, it will be a new life, and a brave one. A small gray motor coach approaches and rattles to a stop. You put your hat back on and pick up your cases. Two young men with sullen expressions alight from the coach. One looks you up and down before heading away. The driver also steps down, glancing at you before crossing the road to visit the tobacconist. When he returns, he is rolling a cigarette between his yellowed fingers. He gives it a final twist and examines you as he reaches for his matchbox. He is a thin man in his 50s, dressed in a stained shirt with the bus company emblem, yet his eyes are sharp in their dark sockets. Where to? You show him your ticket for Ossipee. From there, you will connect to Rochester and Portsmouth before the final coastline to Newburyport, and finally, Arkham. You should be able to afford a rail ticket for at least some of the way. Otherwise, this will be the first of many long bus trips. The driver scratches the match and lights a cigarette. The end flares as he takes a draw. Then he exhales and gestures to the back of the coach. Luggage racks up there. Now look at your investigator sheet. At the top you have spaces for 8 characteristics. Strength, constitution, power, dexterity, appearance, size, intelligence, and education. Now, if you would like to know more information about what these characteristics mean, read page 6 of the Quick Start rules. So right now we're going to fill in some values and kind of detail them. Rather than picking and choosing, we have to fill out 8 values, so basically I'll roll a d8 and kind of go down the line. So, first one is 6. So apparently my education is a 40, not the greatest, not the smartest person, I suppose. Already rolled that number. What are the chances? My size is a 50. My appearance is a 50. Not the most attractive person. Power is a 50. Power is kind of your magic use. Actually, I'm down to 4. I'm going to go to the D4 dice. So my dexterity is a 60. Intelligence is a 60. And finally, just a 50-50. Constitution is a 70, and my strength is an 80. Awesome. So I'm kind of this not that attractive, uneducated, but very strong. Deceptively strong, because I'm not actually that big. Intelligence is also your idea roll, or idea stat, so. And I don't have the sharpest wit, and my dexterity actually isn't that great, but I've got the muscles, I guess. Of course, you can allocate these as you wish if you're doing this scenario by yourself. And these are just the kickstart or quick start versions. So I believe the full character generation, they're not just in sets of 10. You kind of roll dice, and there's a different process for it. But this works for kind of randomizing. I don't like to pick and choose and make all my stats the best. I suppose this gives you keeps me honest. So now we go to number 8. Back with the story. The driver smokes and watches as you drag your cases to the back of the motor coach. The rack is set inconveniently high on the vehicle. You get a grip on the heavier case. If your size is 40, go to 23. If your size is higher than this, go to 38. The driver continues to enjoy his cigarette, watching with keen interest as you struggle with the cases. You grit your teeth and heave the second one into place. Perhaps the residents of Arkham will have better manners. The driver flicks a cigarette into the gutter and steps into the motor coach. Its engine coughs into life. You board, grateful that you will be the only passenger for the initial part of your trip, at least. With mixed emotions, you watch from the window as the tired avenues of your old home slip behind you, receding into the distance. For a few minutes, you can still see the church spire over the brow of a low hill. Then the road dips, and it, too, is gone. Arkham is your new home. You will travel there and make a new start. You will see 2 smaller boxes to the right of each characteristic value. Half each value rounding down, and write the result in the upper box. And then divide each value by 5, again rounding down, and write the result in the lower right box. We will use these numbers later. If you are using the interactive PDF version of the investigator sheet, you'll see it does all the math for you. So that's one thing I didn't mention. A cool thing they released for the 7th edition in all the character sheets is this interactive PDF, which you can basically pull up on your computer, and like it says, you type in the number, so all the fields are highlighted, so you can just type in the information, your name, player, etc. But with the numbers and this new half and fifth values, it'll automatically calculate everything for you. So, for instance, our strength is 80. You type in 80 instead of calculating like we're about to do. It'll just do it all yourself. So, I'm going to go ahead and do the calculations, and we'll probably skip this part since it's probably not that fun watching me do math. I don't know. Alright, we're back. Sorry about all that fancy math. Continuing on. In the strip below, you will see tracks that record sanity and magic points. Beginning sanity is equal to your original power, which is 50. And beginning magic points are the same as the value you've just assigned for power, divided by 5. So for sanity, I'm going to circle the 50 to show we start with 50 sanity. Hopefully it stays around there the rest of the game. I don't want to go crazy. And beginning magic points, power divided by 5, which is 10. I don't know if that's good or bad. Alright, then we continue on with 134. The coach putters through the countryside. At first, the interior road is stifling, and your stomach lurches with every bend in the road. However, the driver opens his window, and by switching seats, you find a spot where the breeze hits your face. You soon relax into the journey, observing the quaint little hamlets that the coach serves. A heavy-set woman boards at one settlement and gives you a polite nod. She gets off at the next one. The road rises a little, passing cornfields and orchards. The leaves are turning, and the trees are alive with glorious reds and golds. You have just begun to doze, when the driver takes a tight bend at speed. Add size and constitution together, then divide the total by 10, rounding down. This is the starting value for your hit points. Mark it on your investigator sheet. Your current total may drop, but is unlikely to exceed the starting value. So, our size and constitution together is 120 divided by 10. So, starting value for hit points is 12. Moving on, you also have a luck score. Roll 3 6-sided dice. We call this 3d6. If you are new to role-playing, you can read about role-playing dice and their terminology on page 6 of the Quick Start Rules. Multiply your 3d6 by 5 to get your beginning luck score and mark it on your investigator sheet. So, just putting it out there real quick. This is a 6-sided dice, a d6. I guess the d4 should have come first, then the d8, and then the 10-sided dice, which we use in the percentile. So the 10 and percentile are both 10-sided. Then there is the d12 and d20. When there's a D in the number, it basically tells you how many sided dice you have. But in this case, we're using 3d6 multiplied by 5 to get our luck. So we rolled a 13 altogether. Times 5 gives us 80. No, not 80. Sorry, 65. Wow. Okay, so continuing where we left out the story. Just read, you have just begun to doze when the driver takes a bend at tight speed. Now you must make a roll against your dexterity. Roll 1d100. This means rolling two 10-sided dice and using one value for the tens and one for the units. You must choose which is which before you roll. If you rolled equal to your dexterity or less, you pass. If you roll greater than your dexterity, you fail the roll. Now, you may be tempted to skip such rolls and simply pretend you always pass, but Call of Cthulhu is a game of mystery and horror. The terrible disasters that can befall your character are part of the fun. You will not necessarily have more fun if you pass every roll than if you would have if you failed. So, rolling percentile, hopefully these green and white ones give me some good luck. 40, pretty good. And my dexterity 60, so I pass. So I like this point that it mentions when I explain to new players why you roll dice. RPGs are essentially, you tell a story, and if you're telling a story, oftentimes you want to be the hero, do everything right, not make mistakes. So if it were up to you, you probably, would pass every roll and do everything correctly. I like to say that the dice keep you honest. It adds a degree of chance and randomness, so it can lead to situations, as randomness does, that are unexpected and can be really funny or memorable. And that's something you might not get if you fake your rolls or if you lie about it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about having fun. I suppose if you're missing on everything, it might not be that fun for you, but hopefully you have a good keeper who can keep the story going and make it interesting without just purely there to punish you. But anyways, continuing with the story. If you pass the dex roll, which we did, go to 261. A desperate yell awakens you. You feel yourself slide from the seat as the driver spins the wheel and the motor coach plunges off the road. You grab hold of the seat in front, just in time to prevent a painful fall. The coach stops with a thump. Now you see what has happened. A Fordson tractor has stopped in the road, and your driver has to swerve to avoid the steel obstacle. He leaps from his seat into the road, unleashing a string of curses at the farmer. You take a moment to catch your breath. Perhaps you should offer assistance? But the driver has already returned. He backs the coach up a little and threads it around the tractor, glaring at the farmer. You resume your journey. The driver takes the curves with more caution than before. He glances over his shoulder at you a couple of times. Sorry about before, he says. That fellow was dumber than a hog. I'm Silas. What's your name? The accident was at least as much Silas's fault as the farmer's, but it doesn't seem shrewd to antagonize the man while he is driving you through the middle of nowhere. Make up a name for your character and record it on your investigator sheet. You may add your age. For the purposes of this adventure, your character should probably be aged between 23 and 36. I have no idea about a name. There are random name generators. Actually, in the main rulebook, if you have the PDF yet, I know the print version is not out for 7th edition. In the investigator handbook, I believe there's a table of names, and you can kind of roll various dice to kind of give you a random combination. We'll go with the name James, I suppose. Age, we'll kind of split the difference between what they give you, so 23 and 36. We'll just stick it at, 29? That works. Continuing with the story. The coach turns into a narrower road, which weaves uphill through woodland. Silas becomes chatty. Going to Arkham, eh? Can't say I ever heard of the place. Went to Boston once, didn't like it. Too much hustle and bustle. You got family there? A special someone waiting? The afternoon is wearing on. You see no harm in confiding in Silas about your new life. A job, eh? What's your line? Choose an occupation for your character from the following options. So here are the options. Antiquarian, doctor of medicine, journalist, private investigator, and professor. So I feel like my character, James, is probably pretty young still, 29, so maybe not quite settled in. And he seems, If the job is making him leave, he must not be tied or enjoying what he's doing. I feel like journalist is probably fits this character the best. So we go to 239. You mentioned the reporter's job, which you secured at the Arkham Gazette on the strength of a few freelance pieces in your local newspaper. It will be a relief to get away from the vapid society columns and whimsical stories. You understand the Gazette covers everything from the breakthroughs of researchers at Miskatonic University to the most sordid exploits of local ne'er-do-wells. It should be something to get your teeth into at any rate. A writer for a newspaper? Silas seems confused, as if he thought the stories somehow wrote themselves. Your credit rating skill is 20%. So on the sheet here, I'll fill out 20% under credit rating. Your occupational skills are arts and crafts, photography. So under arts and crafts, under some of these options, you can write things in to be more specific about it. So under art and craft, I have photography written in now. History, library use, own language, psychology, and I can choose one of the 3 charms available: fast talk, intimidate, and persuade. I can also pick any 2 other skills except for Cthulhu Mythos as personal specialties. Yeah, right now I'm going to mark these. When I'm telling new players, as they're filling out their investigator sheets, there are check boxes next to each skill on your sheet. When you're filling them out and kind of marking which ones you are allocating skills for, you don't want to actually check these check boxes. The check boxes are there. I'm sure they'll explain it later, or I hope so they will anyway. They're basically for when you successfully complete something or if you miss. So at the end of the scenario, if you're playing a longer campaign, your character has the opportunity to kind of level up or learn from their experience. It's not a guaranteed thing, but that's a way to basically mark that you attempted that skill. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and mark all these skills. And then we allocate these values. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll catch you after the cut. Okay, so we're back after the break. For my, social skills, I chose Intimidate, and I feel like because of his strength and his size, it probably fits his character as a journalist. Maybe he's physically imposing, or it looks like he can throw down. Going along those lines, I also chose Fighting, Brawl, for one of my choices of skills. And just because I've played Call of Cthulhu before, I also chose Spot Hidden. It's an important skill. But I also feel like it fits the character. I mean, as a journalist, you should have a sharp eye and be able to notice things that maybe the normal person wouldn't. So now we're going to roll some dice and fill those in. Okay, after rolling the dice, this is our stats now. Photography, got a 50. Our credit rating is 20, as it said. Credit rating, it's not like our credit rating as we think about now. It's kind of your reputation. Sometimes it's tied to income as well. So if you were like president of the United States or something, you would have a extremely high credit rating. With the 20%, I don't have much pull. I must not be the greatest journalist, which is probably why I'm leaving whatever city I'm in right now. I should mention that this is 1920s. Call of Cthulhu generally takes place in the Jazz Age. It's where a lot of Lovecraft stories took place. It makes for interesting storytelling because you don't have a lot of the modern gadgets to kind of get your way out of situations. So the struggle sometimes is more real when you can't just pick up a cell phone, look up information. It makes library use a lot more useful of a skill. You know, you don't have the Wikipedia skill. But anyways, continue on with the story. You realize Silas hasn't made a stop since the incident with the tractor. The motor coach winds its way uphill. However, your thoughts are interrupted as the road crests a ridge, and you are treated to a magnificent view of the vista below. A creek snakes through the valley, breaking the rich autumn palette of the tree line. In the distance, the white mountains rise into hazy cloud. There is no settlement, not even a cabin, as far as the eye can see. Birds drift through the treetops, and you can just make out what might be 2 white-tailed deer lingering by the water. Perhaps you are making a mistake by moving to the city. Could you survive on your own in this lush wilderness? You have a base ability and most skills, listed in brackets after the skill name on the investigator sheet. For instance, you have 20% in climb and a base dodge equal to half your dex. So on your sheet you'll see percentages that already exist next to the skills that are named. And it says in a dodge skill equal to half your dexterity. So our dexterity is 60, so under dodge you should write in 30. Choose 4 skills which are not your occupational skills, nor Cthulhu Mythos. These are your personal interest skills. Boost each of these by 20. So the percentages that already exist on the sheet that are written in, for instance, we'll use climb since that's what we just mentioned. Climb, there's a 20. If you're going to increase it, something by 20, you add 20 to the existing skill. So if we wanted to bump our climb, it would now be a 40 instead of a 20. If we wanted to bump our accounting by 20, it starts off at a base of 5%, so we would write in 25%. Some people get hung up on this when you're first allocating skills. Because generally when you roll for your occupational skills, it automatically replaces what is there. And then the game gives you an option to add to existing skills. So again, occupational skills generally replace the values, and these additional personal interest skills are added to the existing value. At this point it says you may like to calculate half and 1/5 values for each skill in the same way we did for our characteristics above. Remember to round down. If you are bored of calculations, you can leave the math until it becomes necessary. Or, if you are using the interactive PDF version, you'll see it does all the math for you. So we're going to take a quick break, add the skills, and figure out our half, at least for some of the more prominent skills. We'll see you on the other side. Alright, so we calculated most of our other values. The skills that we pumped up, I added 20 more to climb, so climb is now at a 40. Listening seems like it works for a journalist, so that's also a 40 now. I put in stealth. It seems like he's a small guy, likes to sneak around, so that's now a 40. And then finally navigate, I put a 30. He should be able to find his way around somewhat. All the other skills I think we leave normal, and now we are at the next phase of the story. The motor coach rattles on through the hills, and Silas lapses into silence. The sky darkens behind you, pinks tinting the clouds as the sun descends. Finally, a welcome sight comes into view, a settlement on the crest of a hill. This doesn't look like the pictures you've seen of Ossipee, but perhaps you can persuade Silas to stop while you stretch your legs. Minutes later, a harsh stuttering from the engine interrupts your reverie. Silas frowns and rattles the gear stick. The motor coach falters in its ascent. Silas utters a curse you don't recognize and grinds his teeth, struggling at the wheel. You seem to inch up the hill until you reach the first buildings, low dwellings constructed from a rough red stone. Silas wrestles the coach into a small bay off the road. He scrambles from his seat and makes for the engine compartment. You must now choose to make a roll against Drive Auto or Psychology. If you choose Drive Auto, you need to roll equal to or less than the skill value. If you choose Psychology, you need a hard success. This is a roll equal to or less than half the skill value, so this would be the number in the upper right box. You may attempt only one skill roll. So our Drive Auto is 20, and our Psychology, a hard roll, upper right box, that would be a 25. So we're going to try the hard roll against Psychology. So we need a 25 or less. $30, just missed it. Okay, so we fail our roll. Silas opens the engine compartment and sticks his head inside. The hot metal pops and sizzles. He pokes at various components, then withdraws and wipes his brow, smearing it with dark grease. I ain't sure what's wrong. Might be the oil pressure. Might be something knocked off kilter when we took that spill. but I can't do much until the engine cools neither. And with the light failing, I reckon we'll be here through the night. He wipes his hands on a rag. The shadows from your surroundings are already long, and the air is chilly. You feel stiff from the journey, and a night in the rickety coach sounds unappealing. Silas sees your dismay. This here's Emberhead, miles from any place. I only come through twice a week, but the folks here are good people. May Ledbetter keeps a spare room. She'll look after you. Up that alley, turn right, first house on the left. He scratches his cheek, looks again into the engine compartment, and spits on the ground. Meet me back here at 8 in the morning, and we'll see how we stand. In a normal Cthulhu game as a player, some of this information you might want to write down. Obviously with the PDF of the solo adventure, they kind of give you your options and tell you what you can do. But if I were playing this, I might write down May Ledbetter as a person of interest that I should probably seek out, just so I have that information at my disposal. Back to the scenario, we have 3 options in front of us. To look for May Ledbetter's house, to ask Silas where he will spend the night, and to challenge Silas about the breakdown. While our guy likes to intimidate, I don't necessarily think he would challenge Silas. The description we heard about kind of tells us the story, so I don't think it'll do anything except to maybe upset him a little bit. I am kind of interested in where Silas will spend the night, and it seems like we'll still have the option to look for May's house, so I'm going to go with the second option and ask Silas where he'll spend the night. You ask about Silas's plans. He gives the engine a sour glance before answering. I've got acquaintances here in the village. Reckon one of them owes me a favor, enough for bed and breakfast in any case. He stares at his grubby hands. Probably won't stretch to a hot bath, though. You don't seem to have a lot of options. You fetch your cases from the back of the motor coach. The last thing you need is for all your worldly possessions to disappear into some stranger's hovel overnight. You drag your cases between the sullen buildings. You feel surprisingly weary, considering you have spent all day sitting down. Silas's directions lead you to a modest dwelling with a slate roof. A nameplate reads Ledbetter, and underneath, a sign in neat copper plate reads Lodging Room. The lane around you is gloomy, but a lamp flickers in the window. A breeze chills your face. You're not about to begin your new life by sleeping in the street. You rap on the weather-beaten door. After a moment, you hear footsteps inside the house. A bolt is drawn back, and the wooden door swings open. A figure with loose curls and a rough-looking house dress peers at you. Her gaze takes in your traveling suit and your case. Her voice has a slight Irish lilt. I'm not going to attempt to end my reading. I'm just going to read it straight. Hello. Should I take it as you're looking for a room for the night? You inquire as to her rates, suppressing a grimace. As far as you've seen, the village does not offer you many alternatives. Oh, you'll find them very reasonable, she says. You look tired. I'm May. Come inside and we'll talk over a cup of tea. The Ledbetter house feels cramped, the low ceiling and simple fittings. But it is well kept, and a cheerful fire crackles in the grate. The aroma of tea is soothing, and the cup warms your fingers. Have you come to Emberhead for the festival? Asks May. To explain what happened with Silas on the coach, go to 14. To ask about the festival, go to 21. I think I have time to explain to her about my situation, so I'm more curious about what festival she's talking about right now. Well now, I suppose the festival is about the only reason folks come to Emberhead. I thought you would maybe come to study it or take photographs. Well, it's not tomorrow night, but the night after. I suppose it looks very strange to a passerby. May tops up your tea. The spout chinks against your cup. We've got the beacon, you see. One night every year, there's a torchlit procession, and we light the beacon on the cliffs. You've never seen the like of it. They say it keeps the spirit of the village alive for another year. It's a celebration. A celebration. She tails off for a moment and blinks. But you didn't come here to listen to me blather, and you must be hungry. I can rustle you up a bit of stew. How would that be? You ask again about her rates, and May names a price so low you accept it without hesitation. The room is small but comfortable, and the stew dark and hearty. After dinner, you have a couple of hours before your usual bedtime. Now we have the options to talk to May some more, to walk around to get our bearings, or to turn in early. I want to walk around a bit, but I also want to see what else May has to say. So May talks about life in Emberhead. In her letters, my sister always asks if I'm not bored, living in such a small place. She lives in New York, then she writes about how frightened she is to walk home at night. It's a small place here, yes, but that means we have a real community. Everybody's face is known. Everybody works together. Nobody is excluded. Except those who choose to exclude themselves, of course. I couldn't live anywhere else now. Now I have to make a charm roll. If I succeed, go to 39. If I fail, go to 51. My charm is only 15. It doesn't seem likely. 64. I fail. As the hour wears on, you are amused to hear May transform into a sort of tired tourist guide. Of course, the views from here are spectacular on a good day. A clear view all the way around. If you're a painter, you'll be right at home. If your tastes run more to the artisan, there are workshops on Silbury Street, just at the end here and turn right. They're not set up for visitors, you understand, but you'll see the real craftsman at work, the genuine article. Now, if you're looking for freshly baked bread, it seems a shame to point out that you intend to be on the road again shortly. You let May continue until she begins to yawn. Would you listen to me yapping? Time to turn in. When would you like your breakfast? As May stands, you hear a clunk behind you. You look over your shoulder, but all you can see is a wooden door, securely closed. May Tutts, the young lady of the house, shall have been listening to us. Ruth, come and greet our guest. There's a short pause, then the door creaks open. Two wide eyes peer at you from the gap, between tousled hair and a rough nightgown. What do you say? The eyes blink. Pleased to meet you. Now get back to bed. The door closes again. My daughter Ruth. 10 years this summer. She's a delight and torment all in one. But don't worry, she sleeps in with me. She'll not disturb you. Good night now. You retire to your room. It is a little chilly, but you are too tired to worry about lighting the fire. The sheets are clean, and the bed soon warms up. The silence outside is strange after living in a town for so long, but you soon drop off. So, if I were running as a keeper, or if I were playing as a real player, I'd probably ask the keeper if I could still go outside and look around the town, even though it's late. And maybe he may not, or the keeper may not offer me that option or deny me for some reason. I don't know what I missed out on by not exploring the town first, but maybe I would have missed out on meeting Ruth or listening to May talk some more. We didn't really gain any information, so I guess I feel it's kind of a waste and we would have missed out, but we'll see what happens. You dream of a fire in the grate, coruscating colors shimmering through the dancing tongues of flame. At first they are tiny, almost microscopic, but they grow and grow until a kaleidoscope inferno spills from the fireplace, spreading across the floor up the sheets. You wake with the start. Daylight glints through the curtains. You get up and examine the grate, blinking the sleep from your eyes. It is quite cold. If you have taken any damage, you may heal 1 hit point back for your night's sleep. May seems to have no running water, but has supplied some in a ceramic jug. You freshen up at the washstand and go in. She cooks a hearty breakfast and leaves you in peace to eat. At about 7:30, you are paid up, packed, and ready to go. You bid May goodbye, and she wishes you the best for your new career in Arkham. If you succeeded at a skill roll last night and wish to investigate the results further, I don't think that applies to us. You are already tired of your heavy bags. Hopefully, Silas has repaired the motor coach and you can resume your long journey. A sourpuss he might be, but the old driver seemed to understand his vehicle well enough. You pause to check your watch. Still 20 minutes early and round the final corner. The motor coach is gone. You put your bags down and search the area, trekking up and down slopes and around corners. At the edge of the village, You trace the long road back as it winds across the hills. 8 o'clock comes and goes. There is no coach to be seen. A passing villager notices your bags. Looking for the bus? I heard him take off at first light. He's due back in 3 or 4 days. If you need a place to stay, May Ledbetter rents a room. The man raises his hat off to you and strolls on into the village. You curse Silas under your breath. Perhaps he went for parts, but you wonder if the old goat has stranded you here on purpose. May is doing laundry and looks surprised to see you again. Forgot something? When you explain the situation, she offers to store your bags while you try to arrange alternative transport. You are grateful to relinquish the load. Nobody here has anything like a car. She strokes her chin and narrows her eyes. Maybe you could find somebody with a horse and a cart for your bags. I could ask around later. Try Mr. Winters at the village hall. He'll know if anyone will. Or ask among the artisans. Their workshops are at first left on Silbury Street. She reaches over and squeezes your wrist. Don't worry. I won't see you sleeping in the street, money or no money. You thank May and turn to face the village. You wander the streets of Emberhead without any particular destination in mind. The village is built on a relatively flat upland with splendid views. To the north, the hazy tips of the White Mountains reach for the heavens, and to the south, the sparkling waters of Lake Winnipesaukee touch the horizon. The village itself takes less than 5 minutes to cross from the edge to edge. You arrived on the winding road to the west. The only other road leads to the south, following a lower ridge of land as it turns east. In the southwest of the village, an open grassy space borders a ruined church, its graveyard cresting the cliffs. To the northeast, 3 main thoroughfares meet at a raised black metal structure. It looms, stark against the blue sky. Now we have a bunch of options. We can ask about transport at the general store, seek out the village hall, walk down to the lower level and check out the eastern road, examine the large metal structure, explore the church, or look for local people with their own transport needs. I think I'm going to go with the first option, asking about transport at the local general store. I may run into other people and stuff too. So here the link is actually broken, so we'll have to flip through manually. The general store is on a corner beside the main road, just before it plunges to the south. The shopkeeper is a brisk, immense lady with a starched apron and strong shoulders. She looks hard at your unfamiliar face. Transport? There's a motor coach that comes through twice a week. Missed it. Truck's bringing my supplies every second Tuesday, but he's not due until next week. She shrugs. It seems Emberhead is content to keep its distant from the outside world. You have enough money to buy 1 or 2 inexpensive everyday items here. Note them down on your investigator sheet. Okay, we have to remember that the year is 1927, so there's no weapons except a dusty hunting knife. Maybe this hunting knife is not bad. I guess as a journalist, I'm not sure what I would need or feel, Knowing it's a Call of Cthulhu scenario, I kind of understand there might be danger. Maybe that's why I would pick up the knife, but in that situation, I'm not exactly sure what I would pick up, so I think that's what I'll pick up, a small knife and a handheld light. So on the sheets here, on your second sheet, sometimes it's on the back, you can write down gear and possessions, or like cash and assets, so they didn't give us an exact amount of money that we have, but just so that we can pick up 1 or 2 inexpensive things. So I'll write those down now. Okay, so after buying the stuff, we were beginning to get our bearings in Emberhead. Would you like to explore some more? You may choose another option from those below. Do not repeat a previous choice. Once you have tried 4 options, or before that, if we're ready to move on, we go to the number 3. I don't think we're ready, so we've chosen 1 option. Our other options now: seek out the village hall, walk down the lower level, check the eastern road, explore the church, or look for people. I kind of want to look for people. I think that gives us more information than just structures, so that's what we'll do. Not far from the Ledbetter house, on the north side of Silbury Street, there is an open courtyard. The rhythmic tattoo of a hammer seems to announce your approach. The courtyard is the busiest location you have yet seen in Emberhead. It is bordered by a ring of workshops. Some are brick buildings, some only rough huts. A blacksmith ceases to hammer, thrusting something red and glowing to a bucket of cold water. A weaver looks up from his loom, blinking at you a moment before returning to his shuttle. A potter, engraver, and carpenter each work in their own space, exchanging friendly banter. You move among the artisans, chatting about their work. Eventually you bring up the question of export. Some of them send occasional packages with Silas. Some restrict their custom entirely to villagers. You receive no suggestions about alternative transport. Now we get to make a psychology roll. $53, just missed. Our psychology was a 50, man. So I don't think we've passed like one roll this whole time. So that sucks. We're basically back to the options page. We have now tried two things. So I'm thinking either Village Hall, Eastern Road, or the metal structure. Let's go to the Eastern Road. The air is fresh, and the walk down to the lower ridge invigorating. You notice cultivated fields stretching through the lowlands around Emberhead, and among the crops some livestock, but no horses. Are you going to have to make your onward journey on foot? Further down, the road skirts the edge of the ridge and descends. There are a few scattered hovels here, with signs of habitation. They are set a substantial distance apart. As you examine them, a door opens, and an older man steps out. He wears a bedraggled suit, but carries a piece of cloth, which he tosses over his head like a hood. As he does this, he sees you and freezes. Make a luck roll. Got it. The man looks up at the village, scanning the cliff tops. You get a brief flash of his face. There's something unsettling about it. Then he turns to walk away from the road, but as he does, he raises a hand and slowly beckons to you. If you follow the strange man, turn to 142. If this seems unwise, turn to 160. I think I'll follow him. You follow the man around the outcrop. He glances up, then steps between two rocks and vanishes. Closer inspection reveals a narrow channel leading into the cliff. There's just enough light to see a small, natural chamber within. You will be uncomfortably close to this man if you go inside. To follow him in, turn to 191, or we can keep our distance. I feel like we should just keep going. With wary steps, you squeeze between rocky outcrops and enter the concealed chamber, almost banging your head on the low ceiling. The man settles back against the wall and watches you until you draw close. Then he slides back his hood. Make a sanity roll. So the first call for sanity, we don't really understand why we're losing sanity, or if we do, but sanity is 50. Let's try to beat it. 60. If you fail, lose 1 sanity. Some of the man's face remains. A strip from the side of his jaw to his right eye socket is healthy and pale, if aged. But the left side is consumed by angry scar tissue. One eye droops, hooded by melted flesh, and the nostril on that side is pulled open to leave a gaping hole. The disfigured man studies your reaction with his one good eye. Name's Arbogast. Willard Arbogast. Guess I don't need to ask what brings you to Emberhead. If you claim you have come to the festival, you can go to 206. If you omit Silas has stranded you here, go to 214. I think we might say something about the festival since May said that it's the only thing that people come here for. And as a journalist, you could probably fudge your way. Probably seems plausible. That swollen mouth gives a little twist upwards. Yeah? Where'd you hear about it? You say something vague about an article in the newspaper. Newspapers must have changed since the last time I read one. There's something in his tone you don't like much. Arbogast fixes you with the lopsided yet intense stare. You seek me out, eh? He looks up at the cave ceiling. Which one of them told you about me? Never mind, it don't matter. Truth is, they fear what I know. They'd never come at me direct. Don't want to end up like old Arbogast. He giggles. The high-pitched sound is all the more grotesque, coming from those bloated lips. Then, abruptly, his gaze turns to iron. Emberhead died 40 years ago, shattered by flame, consumed by the stars themselves. The ancient hill was cleansed by inferno, and from the blackened ground came new life, as is the way of all things. The Abenaki knew. Arbogast wipes his nose on his sleeve. Except none of that happened. The flames were turned away. The necessary death postponed a year, and a year again. And now those up there, he stabs a scrawny finger at the ceiling, think themselves saviors of the village. Think they can defy the great old ones. Yeah, Cthulhu. He shakes his head. With strange aeons, their lives matter less than the blink of an eye. A fierce intelligence burns in his gaze, but you suspect Arbogast might be quite insane. Should his mood change, it would not be difficult for him to seize one of the loose rocks and crack your skull with it. Now we have a few options. We can ask him about the Abenaki, ask him about great old ones, ask him about the villagers, or we can leave while we still can. Well, you know me, ever the journalist, or you know James, I should say. He wants more information. Let's roll a dice on this one. So on a 1 or 2, we'll ask about the Abenaki. 3 to 4, we'll ask the great old ones. And 5 through 6, we'll ask about villagers. 6. Alright, let's see about those villagers. Arbogast's face twists, creasing the scarred cheek. Puh. Their fathers and mothers knew the truth. They listened. They knew their doom and found their place within it. They looked into their own hearts and did the unspeakable. The current brood have the arrogance of children. Everything has been given to them, and they assume it always will. He glares at the cave ceiling. They would that I left, or I died, that I took the old words with me. But mark what I say, those who live in high places have further to fall. Arbogast runs a hand through his hair. A wide strip is missing on the left side, displaced by scar tissue. He climbs to his feet. Arbogast pauses in the shadows. There's something about you. Something the previous ones never had. Perhaps you can make it through. If you want to hear more, meet me again after dark, 9 o'clock, the graveyard on the other side. He lifts a gnarled finger. But don't be followed, else I won't be there. This ain't the time of year for a showdown. Arbogast wipes his nose on his sleeve again. Go now. Their eyes are on me. And stranger, don't try to run. You'll never make it. You emerge into the sunlight blinking, more than a little shaken. You have discovered a secret. Later tonight, the text will offer you a chance to follow up on a previous appointment. At that point, if you want to meet with Arbogast again, add 20 to your current entry number and go to that new entry. So, this is obviously a game thing. I'm going to write it down. I'm sure it'll remind us again, but just in case. You turn back to the road and your core business, getting out of Emberhood and onwards to Ossippi. The ridge gives you a good viewpoint from which you can see the course of the road. It winds with the hills, disappearing into the woodland for a while before emerging further on. You lose sight of it somewhere towards the second patch of woodland. By your best estimation, that is at least 6 or 7 miles distant. You see no other settlements or traffic. It may be worth taking a chance and walking. The weather is still mild, but you will need supplies before you attempt it. So, back to our choices. So we've done the general store, checked out the road, and looked for people. So, now our last option. I think we want to check out the large metal structure. Seems to be where some action will take place, and I'd rather know about it beforehand than being thrust into it later. You walk up the approach, the most central of the village's major streets. It points directly at the odd metal structure. As you emerge from the shade of the nearby buildings, you are greeted by a magnificent panorama, spread from the north to the southeast. The last colors of fall tint the hills in a sleepy gold. The structure, by contrast, is made from uncompromising iron, singed black. It supports an immense curved platform at the level of your head. Further struts snake up to a central point. It looks like they may have been some kind of sculpture at some point, but are now twisted and melted beyond recognition. An older gentleman passes, looking at you with rheumy eyes. "Are you here for the festival?" he asks. "That's the beacon. When they light it night after next, you'll be able to see it 10 miles away." He gives a little nod of satisfaction, then moves on, leaning on his walking stick. Now you notice bundles of wood, tied and stacked against the buildings nearby. Perhaps this festival would be an interesting diversion, but you really must head to Arkham as soon as possible. Make a spot hidden roll. Alright, we pass. As you walk away from the iron structure, you notice something strange about the construction of the village. All the wooden dwellings are concentrated in the west and southwest. To the east and northeast, closest to the beacon, the buildings are formed from dark brick and clay. Does this mean the settlement began at the beacon and spread west? You may checkmark the small box beside the spot hidden skill. Alright, now we go back to the decision making number 25. Now that we have tried 4 options. So we missed out on the village hall and exploring the church. Your morning excursions have left you hungry. You roam the streets of Emberhead, looking for sustenance. There is nothing resembling the busy cafes of your hometown, or anything that might be called a restaurant. It is beginning to look like you will have to get supplies from the general store, when May Ledbetter comes down the street with the girl trailing in her wake. This must be Ruth. As she notices you, she races past her mother and approaches you with a smile. This is a different Ruth from the shy creature of last night. As she reaches you, she stops and stretches her arms up in celebration. She looks up into your eyes. Abruptly, the smile drops from her face, and she looks several years older. "Get out before the festival," she hisses. "Get out." She blinks hard, then scuttles back towards her mother. May approaches, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. She smiles. "How are you getting on? Have you found transport?" Startled, you explain the frustrations of the situation. "I try Mr. Winters in the village hall. He's always in of an afternoon. You'll be hungry by now. Help yourself to any food in the house. The door's not locked." You glance at Ruth, where she has squirreled herself behind her mother's leg. Her eyes implore you to silence. So, now we can ask Ruth about what she said. We can ask May about what Ruth said. Or we can say nothing. I guess we don't want to get Ruth in trouble, so we'll move on. You take your leave of the Ledbetters and head towards their house. The door opens easily. In the low kitchen, you make a meal from stodgy bread and leftover stew. A little window offers a view to the mountains. If you learned one thing this morning, it was that Emberhead streets hold little to occupy the visitor from out of town, but there are still about 5 hours of daylight remaining. You could take some provisions and the bare essentials from your luggage and set out in the hope of reaching another settlement before dark. Or you could ask advice from this Mr. Winters. Now, I don't really feel like we'll have an opportunity to leave, and I think this festival probably has enough draw for James the journalist to be interested, so let's go to the village hall. The village hall overlooks the lower north ridge of the village. You walk along Silbury Street to find it, conscious of the oppressive black metal structure framed at the end of the road. The shutters of the hall are open, and some windows left ajar. There is no knocker, but a little bell over the entrance tinkles as you push the front door. Inside, a sturdy door to your right is marked private. To your left, an opening leads through to a bright room. You take a few steps inside. Benches line the walls, and there are 2 notice boards mounted between the windows. You can knock on the door or examine the notice boards. I think I'll read the notice boards first. The floorboards creak beneath you as you cross the room. You feel a slight spring in your step. Perhaps this room is used as a gymnasium for the village children. One notice board appears to be for the adults of the community, and one for the children. The former looks neglected, featuring handwritten advertisements for household items and a yellowed note about telegraph pricing. There's nothing about the festival. The children notice board has a schedule for weekly crochet services and a number of paintings obviously done by children themselves. Most are incoherent, though colorful. As best as you can tell, they depict fireworks, or perhaps the tale of Joseph from the book of Genesis. One has lost a pin and hangs upside down. It shows a giant bird attacking Emberhead. Or it might simply be that the artist has not yet mastered the subtleties of scale. Time for a spot hidden roll. 13. Got it. As the afternoon sun hits the floor, you notice something curious. The boards under the windows are newer than the boards in the center of the room. The frames also show signs of having been replaced in the recent past. Perhaps rain leaked in and rotted the wood. Here it again tells us we can check the spot hidden skill, which we've already done. The door scrapes behind you. A middle-aged, bespectacled gentleman appears in the doorway. May I help you? You explain you are visiting on May Ledbetter's recommendation. Ah, well, I'm Clyde Winters. I'm not sure if I can help you, but would you care for some coffee? I'm partial to a cup in the afternoon. He gestures to the open door behind him. This seems like a worthwhile opportunity, and you are a little thirsty. You step through the door marked private. The other side of the village hall is in marked contrast to the public space. The room is compact, lined with shelves of books and file alcoves. One corner is reserved for a tiny pantry and what is presumably a water closet. You study Mr. Winters as he fills out the percolator. Although thin on top, his hair is oiled and neatly swept back. His suit is a sober affair and well-tailored, even if the cut is a little old-fashioned. A lesser man working alone might have loosened his bow tie for comfort. On the desk against the opposite wall, you notice what looks like a telegraph set. Now we can ask about the telegraph right now or make small talk first. Probably seems healthier to make some small talk. The pot begins to gurgle as you exchange pleasantries with Mr. Winters. Living here? It's a trade-off, like so much in life. He looks past you at a high shelf. I could wish for access to a proper library, of course, but I know myself well enough. I'm strictly a dabbler. And the cities? His face wrinkles in distaste. Too many people. Everybody rushing and shouting. We have a special place here in Emberhood, and someone must accept responsibility for keeping it so. That was my father before me, and now the duty falls to me. He lifts his chin and straightens up. This evening, as the sun sets, look out at the landscape around the village. We have peace here, halfway to the stars. Are we not privileged? Is this not worth the hardships we must accept? He looks at you speculatively. This seems a good time to ask about the telegraph. The telegraph? Much as we value our isolation, we do need the link sometimes. You were hoping to send a message? I must apologize. The line has been down for 2 weeks. I reported the fault, of course, but they're not so speedy when the problem lies in a rural area. I'm expecting a repair the day after next. I do appreciate how frustrating this must be. The coach is due in 3 days? But I think he's going west. Perhaps you might engage a wagon? One of the farmers might. You explain that you have asked a few of the residents already, but to no avail. I'll tell you what. Winters pours you a steaming cup of coffee. The dark liquid smells rich and strong. When the repair crew arrives, I'll ask them to take you back with them. How would that be? They might want $1 or $2 to grease the wheels. It's less than ideal, but it's the first real opportunity you've had. So now we can thank them and leave or ask about the library. Might as well see what we can find in the library. So I'm kind of detailing some of the decisions I make and speaking about that because as you play as a player with a keeper as well, you kind of weigh decisions in front of you. Call of Cthulhu is a game of investigation and figuring things out. You don't know the story or what's really going on behind the scenes, so you're trying to figure out as much information as you can. And the other thing about role-playing is thinking about what your character would do. So I've given you little bits, and based on their stats as well, kind of crafted a character so that it's not just what would Jay do, but what would James the journalist and what he's doing. So hopefully I'm, keeping with the character and what I feel like James would do in these situations. But anyway, so we just asked about the library. I think as a journalist in a small town with nothing to do, you probably feel like maybe some books to read, something to pass the time. You make a small but flattering remark about a couple of the volumes on his shelves. Winters blushes with pleasure. Well, of course they're not my personal collection. They belong to the village, he says. But I did select most of the recent items. This is the community's library, you see. I put up the private sign to stop people just from wandering in from meetings in the other room. But this is really a public space. You scan the shelves. There's a sparse but respectable collection on mathematics and the sciences, passable sections on history and arts, and a shelf of literature. He has a few lowbrow novels tucked away in a corner, with tatty copies of Bizarre Tales magazine. Quality does not always equate to popularity, I'm afraid. Winters gives you an apologetic smile. Now we can do some research in the library, or go outside while it's still light. I think I'm gonna do some research. Or James is going to do some research. Winters is happy for you to spend the rest of the afternoon in the study, and offers you an upright but comfortable chair. We have enough time to pursue one line of research in depth. So, we can go about the history of the area, about the festival, about the sciences, or about weird fiction. I think James by now is really interested in the festival. If nothing else, maybe he'll have a nice story to tell when he finally makes it to Arkham. He can write about this festival in a small town, so that's what we'll do. You're not surprised to find there is no published work on Emberhead's festival. Winters pokes around and finds a cased monograph, handwritten on yellowing paper by a Dr. Annie Olowski, an acquaintance of my father's, I believe, Winters says. The manuscript is somewhat difficult to read, and you make slow progress. Annie Olowski speculates that the festival has its origin in pagan rites, brought over by Celtic settlers, which celebrates the ancient festivals of Beltane, Samhain, Imbolc, and Lughnasadh. There is some discussion of the struggle between the seasons, and a couple of oblique references to the alignment in Emberhead. Annie Olowski suggests that the meaning of the festival slowly changed around the turn of the century. The monograph terminates mid-sentence at the end of page 28, just as it begins to discuss the modern practices. You ask Winters if he has the remaining pages. No, I'm afraid those have been misplaced, he says. Perhaps they are still in the library somewhere, but he shrugs. I must make the time for a thorough stock take. The afternoon wears on. You have not quite finished your reading when Winters glances out the window and stands up. He clears his throat. Now we make a credit rating roll. Yeah, it's only 20, so... Ugh, 27. I'm afraid I have some errands to run before dark, so I must close the library for you today. I do hope you will return tomorrow afternoon, if you are so inclined. You leave the building with Winters, waiting as he locks up. You thank him for the coffee and the access to the library. He disappears off down an alley. You hope to be away from the village before tomorrow afternoon, but it's good to know that there is a place where you can occupy yourself. As the light fades, you return to the Ledbetter house and eat a light supper. May is unusually taciturn. Ruth's eyes flick to yours several times during the meal. There is an urgency there you cannot quite interpret. Afterwards, May ushers the girl into their room. You have been in Emberhead for barely one whole day, and you already feel confined by it, both geographically and socially. The evening seems to offer little. So we can do some stargazing, speak to Ruth, or this is the time to follow up on the appointment. So I want to speak to Ruth, but at the same time, I don't want to miss out on this opportunity to talk to Arbogast. So let's flip to it, I guess. So it didn't actually tell us what to do, so it was a note that you had to make. Again, as a player, you'll be writing down a lot more things like people's names and information you're learning and everything. Arbogast is not at the appointed meeting place. You give him 10 minutes, but he doesn't show. You curse the old crank and head back towards May's house. Psst! A hand snakes from a doorway and grabs your arm. You jump at the sight of that half-faced glimpse in starlight. One of them is near, he whispers, watching. Come with me. Arbogast leads you across the thoroughfares, slipping between houses, The metal structure looms at the end of the street. Silent now, he says, but the beacon will come alive tomorrow night. He ushers you into a little alcove behind the village school. Arbogast glances behind you, then sits down. Again you feel uncomfortable in proximity to that scarred visage. One melted eyelid lifts. You don't have long. Understand this. I was the conduit, the interpreter, before that fool Winters and his fancy words. The things which come to Emberhead care not for words. Those idiots think this is a ritual of sacrifice. He spits on the grass. It is a ritual of control. They know the words, but they do not comprehend the forces they call. He sniffs and sits back. No, you have no time for more questions. I will teach you how to end it in the moment when all is lost. You can return this hill to the earth, to the death that came 40 years ago. I have tried it myself, but... His head sags. I no longer have the concentration. The chant is simple. I can teach it to you, but you must perform it with the clarity of mind that I have lacked for years. Now we can learn this chant, or basically try to leave Arbogast. I don't see the harm in learning the chant, so we'll try that. You feel very dislocated from reality as you sit on a cliff top behind a school at night, learning a chant by rote from a madman. Arbogast is careful to teach you it in sections. He glances into the sky. Won't work right now, the clouds covering the star. But he takes care not to pronounce the whole thing at once. It has a rhythmic beginning and various elaborations, but the core passage is repeated 3 times. Finglui Mglonaf Cthugwa Famolhat Nagahaga Nafulthagan Ya Cthugwa. Finglui Mglonaf Cthugwa Famolhat Ngaga Nafulthagan Ya Cthugwa. In time, Arbogast listens to your recital and nods. Remember every sound, but never speak of it if you have plans left on this earth. You have discovered a secret. If your situation ever becomes desperate enough to try Arbogast's ritual, the text will offer you the option to chant. At that point, if you want to try it, add 10 to your current entry number and go to that new entry. So again, I'll write down this in case we want to use the chant. Arbogast leans back. It will make you one with the living. A black shape lunges from the dark. It wraps an arm around Arbogast's throat and drags him backwards out of the alcove. He grabs at the arm, kicking empty air. You see the gleam of a long blade in the moonlight. Make a dodge roll. Nailed it. A second figure swings at you with some kind of blunt weapon. You shove it aside and scramble out, trying to find a more defensible position. A gurgle draws your attention. Arbogast has a hand clamped to his neck. Blood drips between the fingers and spills from his mouth. His assailant stabs again, the wet blade slicing Arbogast's wrist, even as it sinks into his neck. You see faces now. Low faces, daubed in some kind of tarry substance, eyes gleaming with hatred. Arbogast shoves his attacker off, staggering back, more blood cascading down his arm. The old man has willpower. He plants his feet and raises a hand. Time for a sanity check. Ooh, not good. Faces loom at you, thick with blood and lit by inferno. Someone claws at you, tears at your flesh, flames dancing in his terrified eyes. You fall back. We lose 1 D3 sanity points. So for a D3, you take a 6 and basically split it into 3 parts. So a 2, so I lose 1 sanity, now down to 48, and we lose 1 D2 hit points. We lose 2 hit points, ouch. Down to 10 now. Something you also notice is, obviously, as you lose more and more sanity, it becomes harder and harder to pass. Continuing on. You awake with a jolt, wrestling the blankets, ready for attack. The Ledbetter guest room is quiet, painted with morning light. There's nobody here but you. You raise the blankets and wait for your heart to stop hammering. The Ledbetter kitchen is empty, although bread and eggs have been laid out for your breakfast. There's a note from May explaining that she has taken Ruth out for a few hours. If you were involved in a fight in a village last night and want to investigate the aftermath, go to 70. Otherwise, go to 78. So it appears that that encounter was not necessary, but I do want to follow up on what happened. You feel skittish as you approach the spot where you and Arbogast were attacked. Your memory of the encounter is shaky, but you remember one or two vivid images. At first you think there is nothing to see, no discarded weapons or figures lying unconscious. But upon closer examination, you find sticky, congealed patches and blackened lines in the grass. If the village had a police station, you could go there. But something tells you events have gone beyond that. You make a quiet circuit of the village, pausing in unobtrusive places to watch the villagers. It is rather busy for this time in the morning. Yawning locals stream back and forward along the roads, carrying bundles of split logs to the site of what you've heard referred to as the beacon. You see two figures already up in its superstructure, arranging the wood. The festival bonfire will be most impressive. But do you intend to stay to see it? You suspect by now that something is amiss here. While the villagers are distracted, you may do some illicit investigation, or you may simply leave town without looking back. So now, we can search May's bedroom, go alone to the village hall, take a closer look at the courtyard, spy at the beacon, or try to run away. Options are kind of confusing. I don't think there's been any precedent to kind of examine May's bedroom, or to I guess maybe look at the courtyard. But I think as basically James wouldn't have the motivation to do those things because he hasn't interacted with him enough or found anything interesting enough. I feel like my two best options here are to spy on the beacon, because that's where the festival is going to take place, and even though, James doesn't want to stay here, it's kind of the thing that keeps drawing him back to kind of figure out the mystery. And obviously the game is trying to push us towards that. Or you can slip down the road and flee for good. I feel like James would want to take one last glance and see what's happening at the beacon, so that is what we're going to do. The northern side of the village is bustling, and you are unlikely to remain hidden there for long. You head in the direction of the church, and then move up the east side, behind the houses. A drop looms on your right. One particular section of ground is quite narrow, and you have to hug the building for support. You may give this approach up, or we can proceed. I think we're going to continue trying. The turf sinks beneath your feet, and stones crumble from its edge. Alarmed, you grip the building and ease yourself forward. Finally, you have a good spot to watch the beacon. You lie concealed in the grass and watch the activity around the beacon. Villagers bring in yet more bundles of tinder and stack them in neat bundles. Another shift passes the bundles up to a pair of men standing up to the raised platform of the beacon. They are constructing a triangular structure, resembling a gigantic campfire. As you watch, you are struck by the manner of the laborers. This is their festival. You would expect a cheerful atmosphere and some light-hearted conversation. Yet the faces of some show resignation and detachment, others a naked dread. You watch for a good half hour before you slip away. You feel a deepening unease about Emberhead and this day in particular. So we have a couple of options, and we can choose up to 3 of them. So all the previous options. So we've chosen one already. I said my next option would be to flee, so let's try to get out of here. As you approach the southern road that descends to the lower ridge, you see 4 villagers blocking the route, with farm tools and clubs. You veer off and head towards the west road. Your heart sinks as you see exactly the same scene at the other exit from the village. You are trapped. 2 try to talk your way past one of the guards. Go to 119, or try to slip past in disguise. Or do you know another way to leave the village? Ugh. From these options, it appears like we may have been able to find out another way to leave, which I don't currently have. I kind of expected we would not be able to leave, but I feel like James, that's what he would have tried to do. It does kind of waste an option, but... On the other side of May Ledbetter Street, you see a washing line with some baggy, crumpled clothes. It's not a lot to work with, but you use your own clothes as stuffing. Improvise a hat, and change your gait to a stooped shamble. Nobody gives you a second look as you limp towards the southern exit from the village. The guards are still at their station, scrutinizing passers-by, but they are beginning to look bored. Make a hard disguise roll. Ugh, yeah, okay. So our disguise roll is going to be a 2. So I put points into stealth. I almost put them into disguise. So I'm obviously second guessing that option. So yeah, I basically need an insanely good roll. So I rolled a 15, which is pretty darn good, and I would have made it a stealth roll. I would have made this disguise roll had I added the points there, but I did not. These locals are not as stupid as you think. They grab you and march you back into the center of the village. Okay. The fading light from a narrow window tells you afternoon is giving way to evening. Your hands are shackled behind your back, so you cannot even lie down on the rough bed. Ugh. A woman you have never seen before comes in. Her face is wrinkled and her eyes dull. They do not meet yours, but she puts a cup to your lips. You turn your face away, and when she tries again, you dash the cup from her hands using the side of your head. The clear liquid spills across the floor. The woman gives a half shrug and turns to leave the room. You shout after her, but she gives no reaction. You soon become thirsty. Great. As the light fades outside, your little prison becomes dark. You can hear much activity around the building. Occasionally an orange glow passes the window. The only comfortable position in the shackles seems to be to sit against the bed, the end of the bed with your arms hanging behind you. You need to concentrate and come up with a plan. There is clearly no escape from your bonds. You do not know exactly what your captors want from you, but you cannot ignore the fact that they have spent the entire day constructing a massive bonfire. The door scrapes, wrenching you back into the moment. Orange light spills into the house from blazing torches held at the threshold. 2 large villagers step in and grab you. At least you assume they are villagers. They wear heavy black coats, and their faces and hands are painted entirely black, save only for a red triangle centered on their left eye. You try to drag your legs, but they reach under your arms and lift you bodily from the bed. Outside, it seems that the whole village has congregated to see you. Every single one has a blackened face, with the red triangle motif. Torches sputter and spill fire. You struggle, but you can see physical resistance is hopeless. You are marched to the central street and turn to face the beacon. Procession down the approach is slow and formal, save when you sense weakness and yank at your captors. A chill touches you when you see 3 human shapes carried ahead of you, draped in red cloth. The beacon looms larger and larger, its dreadful silhouette a black triangle pointing to the stars. A low drone begins among the cloaked figures. Unbidden, the word mourners comes to mind. Smoke from their torches makes you cough. You feel heat on your face. As you reach the cleared area around the beacon, 3 dancers break from the pack. Young girls swinging balls of fire in spectacular arcs, drawing circles in the night air. One by one, they draw close to you and touch your forehead with sooty fingers. Each kisses you 3 times. On the left cheek, right cheek, then forehead. Then they whisper in your ear. The smell of kerosene fills your nostrils. Now we gotta try an appearance roll. 50-50. 97. Not even close. Okay. Not fun. Through your sacrifice, the village will be reborn, says the first dancer. You pass from earth to air for all our sakes, says the second. Through incandescence, may you find rapture, says the third. The dance weaves off and disappears behind the buildings. As you arrive beneath the beacon, 10 villagers close in on you. Working with surprising coordination, they immobilize you and lift you up the blackened iron stairs to the raised platform. You cannot help but shiver at the sight of the central framework, twisted from past blazes, and what you can now clearly see to be fastening points for chain. None of the eyes meet yours as they lash you to the metal. The village sings now, something rhythmic and ancient, carved from odd syllables. A second group ascends to the beacon, carrying 3 red-draped bodies. With reverence, they arrange their burdens in a triangle around your feet. Then they withdraw, leaving you alone with the dead, shin deep in a sea of kindling. It seems the entire village is gathered around the beacon to watch you burn. Behind the face paint, you recognize May Ledbetter. And, yes, that is Silas the coach driver standing at her side. The audacity and the scale of the deception staggers you. A man steps up on the die and raises his hands with quiet authority. The frame of his spectacles obscures the red triangle on his face. So we draw here together, again on this night, as we do each year, and we give thanks to the one who will preserve the village against the fire of the void. You will be taken by the ones from above in our stead. Your death will bring life to our streets and bounty to our fields. It will safeguard our children and our elders alike for another year. We salute you. He bows his head. All around the beacon, bearers step forward and lift their torches to the edge of the raised platform. A ring of tiny flames flicker up around the perimeter. As they wink, the singing of the villagers drops into an unearthly rhythm. Now we can throw all our remaining strength against the bonds, or we can wait and see. James by now would be freaking out, and because of his strength, I think he would try to get away. You're tired, and your flesh ought to be insufficient against the dark iron of the chains. Yet you can feel them give a little. There's a weakness in one of the links. You make a hard strength roll. Oh, beautiful. 001. As tongues of fire lick towards you through the kindling, you close your eyes and heave on the chains. They give a little more. Then, clack. One side of the chain drops. You wriggle in the coils, loosening the bond even as heat singes your ankles. The man on the die stares at your movements. Then he picks 2 youths from the crowd and points directly at you. Just as you shrug the chain off and step free from the ironwork, the youths mount the blazing platform. Flames spread up their trousers. As their cloaks catch, they dive at you. Make a hard dodge roll. Oh, missed it by 1. You slither from the grasp of the youths. Fire pours across their shoulders and ignites their hair. Curtains of smoke shroud you. Your legs are burning. You must get off the beacon immediately. So we take 1d6 points of damage from the fire. So we take 3 or down to 7. If we were to have been reduced to 0, we would have been burnt to death. But we are not, so... You leap from the conflagration on the far side of the beacon. Your heart lurches momentarily at the sight of the sheer drop beneath you, but you land a few inches short of the edge. You roll to extinguish your burning clothes. Your lungs feel singed. Everything hurts. The chant of the villagers gathers in intensity. You peer around the beacon. They don't seem to have noticed your absence amidst the billowing smoke. Most of them are staring into the sky. You crawl as rapidly as you can for the cover of the nearest building. With the villagers assembled at the beacon, the streets are empty and you are able to pad away from the blaze. You must get out of the town before they finish. The chanting seems to accelerate as you round the corner of the southern road. Here, parked against the side of the general store, you have your first piece of luck since reaching Emberhead. A bicycle. You learned to ride one of these in Providence. You settle into the saddle. Your burned flesh protests at the contact. We can wait and observe, or we can GTFO. By this time, James wants to choose the latter. It takes a moment to recapture the skill of riding the bicycle, but after the first turn to the east, there is a long downhill out of Emberhead. You hear screams and crackles above you, but concentrate on balancing and working the pedals in your weakened state. You've had too many hopes dashed in this abomination of a village. You keep your head down and ride away. 20 minutes later, with no signs of pursuit, you stop for a breather at the top of a hill. You can see Emberhead rise in the distance. The entire village appears to be ablaze. The dark column of smoke above it will be visible for many miles. But if the village is as isolated as it seems, help is unlikely to arrive in time. You watch the place burn for 5 minutes. Then you mount the bicycle again and ride towards civilization and dawn. Congratulations, you have survived this adventure. You may keep your investigator sheet and use it in another Call of Cthulhu scenario. If you have checkmarked the small box beside any skills, you will have a chance to improve them through experience. The end. Alright, so that was a rather abrupt ending. I think it kind of came to a close really fast, especially considering the journey that it took to get there, but I guess that's what you can maybe expect coming from a solo adventure. I think it did a good job of kind of painting a picture of what options you might have and what things might happen depending on what you choose. Some differences I found in playing the solo adventure is that being unable to explore every option. Generally, as a keeper, I like to give my investigators the opportunity to explore all the options they have ahead of them. So, while time is a factor and you can only do so much in a day during the adventure, we still give them an opportunity to kind of seek certain things out, you know. Sometimes I will only offer them, here are 5 options, you can only choose 4, like the scenario called for, but most of the time, it feels like we missed out on some information. And information in this game is basically how you tell the story. As you move for the story, you gather this information. That's where you find out this backstory of what's going on, solving this mystery. Because obviously the keeper has all this information because he's read through the scenario. He knows what's going on. Both behind the scenes and any action that you've missed. But obviously in the solo campaign, you miss out on a lot of information. I'm sure there's a ton of options. I saw like a picture of a bear enrolling to like escape the creature. That's not something we ran into. I don't know where that would even come into play, you know. And I think there were a couple points in the story where, you know, one failed roll or one success really changed the dynamic of it. As a keeper who was actually running it for investigators, you have the option. It's not like a end-all be-all sometimes. Sometimes the choice might be where you die if you miss, but generally you can recover or change things differently. Till that point where you would have burned to death, I mean, it was not written poorly, but really undramatic and not much to it. It almost made it meaningless, like to go through this whole adventure and to stop abruptly, you know. Well, that may happen sometimes where your investigators die in a scenario that you're running. You try to make, I guess, lives more meaningful, and player deaths matter more. I would at least give it a better description instead of, you burned to death, like, the end, you know? I wish there was kind of a summary. Something that they do in most of the published scenarios is give you a summary of what happened, so that if the investigators die before they get to the end, or if they don't explore all the options, they can at least get the whole backstory of what happened, you know? Like this one was in some ways predictable, you know, you stumble upon the isolated village and the cults that I guess are up to no good, but you have no idea why. I mean, you get a little bit of that history that, you know, something established by the founding fathers of the village, but kind of not really how it's progressed in modern day, why they continue it, you know, something about the sacrifice of people obviously keeps the village going, but it's not like they have a splendid life or we didn't stumble upon any treasures or anything like that. So, obviously, some of this criticism and what we're talking about is coming from the perspective of people who have played the actual game before. Now, had I not ever played Call of Cthulhu, and this was my first introduction, I think I would have enjoyed it, you know, there was a lot happening, you know. I would have liked to have seen or been able to know more of the story at the end of it, especially. Just having a little bit of a summary to give me more, you know, because I don't know if this is something I'll play through again, because you don't know how your dice are going to roll, or I guess you could and just make different decisions this time, you know, when I was a kid reading Choose Your Own Adventure, you'd sometimes just play to try to kill yourself every time, or read through all the options just to see all the different scenarios. And I think in that sense, it does capture what is really cool about playing an RPG, is that when you have a keeper, they have all these options at their disposal. So when you make a decision, and generally if they've planned it well enough, or the scenario is written well enough, the keeper then can continue with whatever thread you're going on. So here we had some limited options. You can't really interact as much, but with the real person, I guess, leading it, they can give you different choices and let your imagination run wild a bit, you know. I know I'm kind of rambling, but I'd never read it or played through it beforehand, so right now I'm just giving you just pure reaction to what we went through. There were a couple typos. They didn't really affect the story or mess it up, so. But I know in playback of the reading there will be some awkward parts. But yeah, I think overall it was a pretty good introduction. I wish there was almost at times more dice rolling or being able to use more skills. I do hear this from players from time to time, like, why did I have this skill that had absolutely that didn't matter at all, you know? We used spot hidden, some dodge and dex. But why did it matter if I had photography, or why did it matter if I had navigation or listen, you know? But as a keeper, you have the ability to maybe change some of these roles. When it asks for a spot hidden, you might give them a different option in order to let them utilize their skills a bit, but still in a context where it would make sense. Obviously, you wouldn't, you know, if you're trying to make a dodge roll, you wouldn't say, okay, use your photography skill. It doesn't really make sense. But if there's somewhere you can put it in, maybe instead of spot hidden, you could take a photograph and examining it later. I don't know. Probably a poor example, but it gives you at least an idea of how a real person running it gives you a better idea. So I guess a newer mechanic in Call of Cthulhu, the 7th edition, is being able to like push your rolls or burn your luck in some ways. So sometimes if you're very skilled at something, you may be able to roll an additional tens roll on your percentage dice. And in doing so, let's say in this instance, like my appearance roll that I had missed. So here I would roll a 53, and that's a failure. But on the other tens, I have a 0, which is very good. So I would have passed. And if you have a skill where maybe you're really good at it, you've tried it a lot, or some other, you know, story reason why you would be able to basically improve your odds at something, you can roll that and take the better result. At the same time, if you're trying something more difficult, or maybe you failed the first time, you want to try it again, you can add the other dice, but you have to take the worst result. Pushing your roll, sometimes you basically straight up re-roll. By doing so, if you succeed, you succeed. But if you fail, it's almost like the results of the failure are worse than have you just accepted your failure in the first place. Another thing that you can sometimes do is burn your luck. So I have like a 65 luck where I missed that run roll by like 1 or 2. Sometimes people will allow their players to burn some of their luck points, and that's a permanent thing that happens. So, but you lose out on luck in order to save yourself or like pass a roll. That doesn't really come out in the solo adventure again. But hopefully this gives you an idea of maybe what some of your options, what you can do in a scenario, and even a look into, if you put yourself in the role of the game or in the role of a keeper, maybe what your player will choose to do, and some of the things that you can give them as options to what happens. So I think if I get some time, I'm going to take a look at some of the other routes that you could take, like if I had passed the disguise roll, or if I tried to leave earlier or talk to Ruth and stuff, because I am curious, just if I can find out any more information, any more lore. Looking at the book, I'm going to see how many total like chunks there are. So 270, yeah, it seems like 270 sections. Now I didn't count how many that I went through, but that's something maybe I'll add in at the end or in the description of the video of how many options out of the 270 that we actually looked at. and maybe take a read at the rest. Something that really interests me, how many ways does the scenario end, either with you dying or town burning down or exploring and figuring out the history. I feel like I didn't really have any part in stopping or solving. It was almost like I was just there and the events happened to me rather than an active part in stopping or preventing or even fighting against anything. It kind of was like, yeah, I'm here and things are happening and a bad thing happened and I tried to get out. I know in other scenarios that we try to run, I mean, the players have a little more just control and power instead of feeling like they're just along for the ride. They're more invested because they can control the outcome a little bit. And of course, this is all, speaking about a solo adventure, which completely changes that dynamic. Hopefully, if you've never played Call of Cthulhu, maybe that gives you an idea of what's going on. I guess I suggest you to try it out on your own. You know what paths and what directions I took, so you can try something different when you play through it and I guess get your own outcome and maybe you'll fare better. Hopefully you survive. I hope whatever thing was happening behind me as I rode away won't happen to you. But I hope you enjoyed listening or watching and basically coming along for this journey. Something we hope to do with the Out of Space crew in the future is record some play sessions of Call of Cthulhu, so you can also join in those adventures and kind of experience what we take our players through. But I'd like to thank you for watching. Continue watching our channel. Subscribe if you haven't. We also have a podcast, Out of Space Games. You can find it on iTunes or on SoundCloud. We talk about Call of Cthulhu in episode 2, the back half of it, and we will in the future as well. Also follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Out of Space Games. And thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.